This is the Behind the Line podcast, coming to you from the wacky left coast capital of Seattle. News from the Pacific Northwest, the left coast, the U.S., and the world that matters. The stories the MSM won't talk about. Deciphering the truth through all the lies. For more, visit BehindTheLinePodcast.com.
So, two more lunatics make the news this week. We got the magic mushroom airline pilot that tried to crash a plane with 83 people on the West Coast. And last night, you've got another mass shooting in Maine, of all places. 18 people confirmed killed, numerous others wounded. When are we going to deal with the mental health problem in this country? The mental health problem and drug problem. Just look around you. If you're in any big city in this country anymore, there are lunatics everywhere. On the streets, homeless people everywhere. Crime is rampant, and primarily in these Democrat cities and states, it's allowed to go unchecked. In fact, it almost seems to be encouraged by politicians. And here in Washington, where this goofball took mushrooms and got on a plane, mushrooms were just recently legalized here in the state, along with a slew of other drugs that you're allowed to have now, and pretty much use wherever you want. Thanks mainly in part to our politicians at the state level who refuse to enforce laws. And so you've got a guy who legally takes mushrooms that's never taken them before. At least this is the story. This is the story we're being fed at the moment. Gets on the plane, he's on a bad trip, and tries to shut the engines down mid-flight. What do you suppose they're going to do to this guy? You know? They don't lock these people up. He may go to a mental health facility for a short period of time. Then he'll be turned back loose and do God knows what then. Because there's no consequences for your actions anymore. No, because that's racist or that's not fair or whatever. Whatever excuse they use now to let people not take responsibility for their own actions. It's always somebody else's fault. And now you've got another mass shooting from yet another guy who law enforcement was aware of, and they were on the radar, and he had made threats against a military base, and yet nothing is done. He was in a mental health facility during the summer for 2 weeks. And I don't know what the status was on his ability to legally own firearms. It doesn't really matter because if somebody wants a firearm, they're going to get it. And people who do stuff like this don't follow laws. So these laws are ineffective. What would have been effective is if he's on the radar to actually do something about it, to lock him up. And I don't know if Maine has mental health facilities. I know here in Washington and most places across the country, they were shut down because either Bush or Clinton cut back a lot of the federal funding when they were president for mental health facilities. So a lot of them across the country shut down. And then for various other reasons to do with it not being fair to people and this and that. But is it fair to the rest of us to allow these people to walk the streets? Isn't it your primary job as a politician to protect the public? I mean, that's what it should be. We all know that's not what they do anymore. It's just pure corruption, and it's about money, and it's about votes, and it's about manipulation. So this guy, like the typical mass shooter coward, goes, makes threats against a military base, but of course, if he goes there to do what he wants to do, they're going to kill him because somebody's going to shoot back. So like the cowards that these people all are, they to pick a target where people aren't going to shoot back. You know, like schools, or last night, in the case of last night, a bowling alley that was hosting a kids league at the time. You know, what a piece of crap human being that should not have been on the streets. Then he drives to a bar and shoots a bunch of people, and now somehow this lunatic, this mental person, it has managed to dodge all this law enforcement. So obviously the guy's got some brains. He was in the National Guard. I don't know what he trained as in the National Guard, or what he may have done for the military prior to that. But when are we going to wise up and make these politicians pass laws that deal with these people? I'm not talking about gun laws, because gun laws aren't going to solve the problem. And had there been some people in that bowling alley with a gun, that guy would probably be dead. I'm talking about dealing with all these mentally challenged people that we see every day, day in and day out. When are we going to deal with these people? When are we going to deal with the rampant crime that's going on? I've worked in public safety my entire life, my entire adult life. And it has gotten 1,000 times worse in just the last few years, with the amount of mental people that public services, emergency services, are being overwhelmed with every day in every city. You've got people calling in, tying up police, tying up fire departments, tying up ambulance services because they're having some kind of mental episode. They shouldn't even be living on their own. They should be in a facility. I'm talking about people who are hearing voices, who are seeing people trying to attack them. They're hearing voices tell them to hurt people, or that they're going to be hurt. People that believe there are cameras in their house, there's bugs in their phone, they're being followed whenever they leave the house. And I think you would be shocked if you knew how many people every day the police and fire department deal with who believe this, who think they're being followed, who think they're being watched or recorded, or they're hearing voices, or they're seeing things that aren't there. They're all around us all the time. And why aren't they being dealt with? Now, some of these people may not be a danger, but a lot of them are. Why are we allowing them to walk freely? We need to bring back mental hospitals, and we need to fill them up with these people and either get them the help they need or keep them there. They don't need to be out in the general public. And a lot of homeless people are also in the same situation. And how is it the humanitarian thing to do to leave these people out on the street in that condition? People that can't fend for themselves during the winter, completely mentally out of it. Just wandering the streets, underdressed, no shelter, no food. But somehow in the minds of these Democrats, that's better than having them in a mental hospital where they can get some kind of treatment, maybe get some help. Until you treat that problem, until you treat the mental health problem, none of this stuff is going to go away. Homelessness is not going to go away. These mass shootings are not going to go away. You've got news media and government officials drilling the population every day that they're somehow a victim of something and they should be angry about their lot in life and that it's somebody else's fault. And somebody else should pay for that. Until you deal with the rampant crime problem and start locking these people up, because that's what they need. They need to be incarcerated. They need to know that if they break the law or hurt people, there's going to be consequences. It is a deterrent. Whether you want to accept that or not, it is a deterrent. And until that happens, these problems we're seeing every week in this country are going to continue to get worse. These politicians don't have to deal with it. They've got their security. They live in their private neighborhoods. They don't have to deal with the things the rest of us do. Until these politicians start doing their actual jobs, none of this is going to get better. And passing these worthless laws against law-abiding people are not going to solve the problem. Until you start dealing with the people who are committing the crimes or having the mental problems, I'm sorry you're having a mental problem, but that's your problem. And either you deal with it or it's going to be dealt with for you. But you don't have the right to put the general public at risk because you're having a problem. If you don't have a concealed carry permit, I encourage you to get one. I encourage you to go take some firearm classes, get yourself a firearm, and protect yourself. Because you are the only person that's going to be responsible for you and be there to protect yourself and your family. Nobody else is going to do it for you. The police will show up when it's over to clean up the mess. And the politicians will continue to encourage this behavior. You take responsibility for you and yours, and you protect you and yours. Be safe out there.
Thank you for listening to the Behind the Line podcast. If you like this broadcast, please like and share it. Please follow us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, Truth Social, Telegram, Gab, Parler, and LinkedIn. You can find our podcast at BehindTheLinePodcast.com, NetNewsNetwork.net, and on Anchor, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and anywhere podcasts can be found. Thank you for your support.